Mothiur.
Hello.
Um, I know that you were, a city lawyer for 7 years, and then you kind of went on this journey that eventually took you to Schumacher College, and you did a master's in ecological design, which is kind of very interesting and not a typical path for a lawyer at all. And I'm really interested just to know a little bit more about your journey through law, I suppose. And
Yeah, it's a long journey. um, I remember even at law college, because I did an English degree to begin with, so I was always interested in the human condition, and really that was really what was engaging my interest. But law as a practice, I felt really called to justice and finding, doing the right thing and being able to help people. And I even remember at law school, though, when I was learning about law and how different it was from English in the way it worked, saying to people, where's how does love fit into law? And people would laugh at me and go, that's a bit, it's just a bit of a crazy idea, and I'd laugh at myself and so on, and just think it's a bit silly. They don't fit together. But I remember coming across Charles Eisenstein just during the Occupy movement, a video called. Love, the revolution is love, and it was about, his book was called Sacred Economics, and he was talking about love and economics, and I was like, oh my god, here is a person who's talking about love and economics, two things that you could never associate together at this time of this crux. And I remembered my conversations about love and law, and I was like, maybe it's not so crazy, maybe there are other people who are thinking similar things. And yeah, the Occupy movement was a huge opening for me into that longing, and to find other people having that similar longing as well. So that year, 2011, 2012 was a massive change and shift in worldview that was starting to emerge from me.
And did you find that the education in Schumacher, it's kind of so different, this kind of experiential, inclusive education is so different kind of from the traditional legal education? Did your mind almost have to switch around?
It did, yeah. I mean, it switched from when I was doing English to law. I remember thinking, God, my mind has to work in a completely different way, not intuitively, but bit by bit, building up the boring building blocks of logic to get to the answer. And I got used to it. And it wasn't just Schumacher, but I remember even, because that was at the end of the journey, but right at the beginning, one of the things that brought me to Earth Law and was, I told the partner of my law firm, I'm really interested in environmental law, and he said, great, and I'll let you know if there's any conferences, things coming up that might be interesting for you to attend. And he sent me this link to this thing called Wild Law that said something environmental law. He said, oh, why don't you go to this conference? It's a weekend one up in the Lake District. And I looked at it, and it says about environmental law, and I thought, oh, that's okay, yeah, I'll do that. So they paid for me to go to this weekend, and I don't think he really knew himself what it was, because we got there and we were communing with stones, and we were under tree, because wild law was about this whole jurisprudential change to look at nature not as property but as a living being in which we're involved, and so we have to participate with her and understand her. And so I was brought back to my child self of walking in woods under trees and communing. I didn't know what I was doing, but at the same time I felt really excited by this completely different way of looking at law. And there were other lawyers there, were barristers and so on, all quite young. And I remember just being really excited by this, wow, this a whole new landscape that opened up. And this was, early in my legal career. I think I was about 2 years into my legal career, and so that was the first step that I had into thinking that law could be done in a very different way. And it was a passion. It connected my passion for philosophy and jurisprudence, thinking about the human condition, and connecting it to nature and our connection to nature.
Interested to know, so after that experience with the wild law, was it difficult to go back into that traditional environment then?
No, because I just found it as an experience, and I found it quite useful to connect with lots of lawyers who I was still in contact with, who had that passion hidden almost, and we continued in our everyday work, but somehow it helped me anchor myself sometimes to think there was this other way of looking at the world, that I could follow a hobby, an interest. And so there were often wild law meetings. We'd go for weekends to talk about it, and so it kept a lot of my interest. But I didn't at that time think the paradigm in which I was working in was necessarily anything wrong with it, just that it was a bit boring, and it was good to have this other thing occupying my interest. And there was a wild law group we set up and so on. So I wanted to keep the money. I needed the money. So, to me at that time, money and career and doing my best, I was still on that track of most people's track of keeping to the career path, having my status being in the world being defined by my work and my friends and the kind of activities that money could give me. So that was where I was at. So I don't think that in itself was sufficient to shift my world enough to make me drop my legal career.
Yeah. Would you talk a little bit more about what wild law actually is, and say your philosophy now about earth law and wild law? And
Yeah, I suppose I would say there are three strands for me. There is wild law, which is connected to earth law, and then I would also say there is something called spiritual ecology, which is emerging, and all three for me are linked, where I would say for me the overall is that we are part of nature, and that within the consciousness of the human is all of nature, and there's a reciprocity between who we are as human beings and our consciousness as human beings and the world in which we participate. And so for me, wild law itself is a movement started by Cormac Cullinan, who's a lawyer in South Africa, and he worked with Thomas Berry, who was a lecturer at Schumacher College actually. And Thomas Berry was a cultural theologian, and he wrote a book called The Great Work. And within that book, he said the great work of the next movement in culture was to see the earth as a living, like the dog, a living place of subjects. That it's not that everything is an object and human beings are the subject, and the world is a resource which we use as property in it, but that everything is participating equally with ourselves. And to open to that story, that everything is equally participating as ourselves, is to open into the grander, greater story of participation and love. And Cormac Cullinan then put that into a jurisprudential kind of framework by saying, well, earth is seen as property, so we need to move from seeing earth as property to seeing the earth, the living quality of the earth, as having rights as well. So wild law is to bring the wildness of the essence of nature into our legal systems. And earth law is similarly saying that earth has rights as well. So it's another branch of that, coming also from the South American tradition of Pachamama, the Mother Earth, seeing the living quality and giving rights to earth as much and to the living systems as much as human beings. And where that place meets is where one being's rights ends, where another one begins. So it's not everything seen through the lens of the anthropocentric, but seeing it through that we all have rights, and we have to find a place and a balance among that. And for me, spiritual ecology really is beginning to bring in the essence of the spirit, the idea of that within ourselves there is a greater consciousness, there is a transcendental movement to feel that connection to the divine, and there is also the movement towards the earth, to see the divine in the earth and in the qualities of the earth, and then to see the human as connecting both and feeling both, and to know that the ecology of the soul, of the self, is the same as the ecology of the earth, and to see the connection and the pattern between the two, and to feel that when we open into that story of the self, then we open into the story of the earth.